A hiker decided to go on a solo hike one day. He had never hiked alone before, but he thought it would be fun and peaceful. He packed his bag with snacks, water, and a flashlight and set out early in the morning. The day started off perfectly. The trail was quiet except for the sounds of birds and the crunch of leaves under his boots. Tall trees surrounded him, and the cool mountain air made him feel alive. It was just him and nature. The hike was going well, and he was proud of himself for making it to the top of the trail. He stayed a while to enjoy the view before heading back down. But as the sun began to set, something strange happened. The trail didn't look the same anymore. He tried to follow the markers, but nothing seemed familiar. At first, he told himself not to panic. He had been walking for hours. Maybe he was just tired. But as the light faded and the forest grew darker, he knew he was lost. He switched on his flashlight, its beam cutting through the growing darkness, but it wasn't much help. Every path looked the same, and the shadows in the trees seemed to stretch and move. He walked for what felt like forever, but there was no sign of the way back. Fear started to creep in. He knew it was too dangerous to keep wandering through the forest at night, especially with his flashlight battery running low. He was starting to think he'd have to sleep on the cold forest floor when he saw something up ahead. A small cabin, barely visible in the dark. The cabin looked old and abandoned, with broken windows and a door that hung crooked on its hinges. It gave him an uneasy feeling, but he didn't have a choice. He needed somewhere to stay until morning. He knocked on the door, calling out to see if anyone was inside. When no one answered, he pushed the door open and stepped in. The inside was just as creepy as the outside. Dust covered everything, and the air was heavy and stale. But in the middle of the room, there was a bed. It was clean and looked like it had been made just for one person. That was strange, but he told himself it didn't matter. He was exhausted, and it was better than sleeping outside. "I'll leave at sunrise," he thought. "If the owner comes back, I'll explain." He lay down on the bed, but something kept him awake. It was the walls. All around the room were paintings, portraits of people he didn't recognize. Their faces were strange, their features slightly off, and their smiles were wide and unnatural. They were all staring at him. No matter where he looked, their eyes seemed to follow him. It made his skin crawl, but he told himself it was just his imagination. He closed his eyes, trying to ignore the faces. Eventually, his exhaustion won, and he fell asleep. When he woke up the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the room. Relieved that the night was over, he sat up and rubbed his eyes. But as he looked around, his heart stopped. There were no paintings on the walls anymore. Instead, there were windows. And through those windows, figures were standing outside, staring in at him.